Welcome to Onslaught. I'm Felicity Ezewike. According to the World Bank, only about 9% of Africans in the 5 years after secondary school are enrolled in tertiary education, the lowest rate anywhere in the world. This low participation is a massive bottleneck in the continent's, development journey. The thing is, higher education isn't just about diplomas. It is about equipping young people with the skills needed for jobs, innovation, health systems, resilient communities, and economic growth. For many, distance learning, whether online, blended, radio-assisted, or flexible models, offers a potential solution to expand access beyond the walls of university campuses. It has been transformative, that's distant learning now, in some countries, widening opportunities for students who cannot relocate or afford traditional university fees. But it also comes with deep challenges like digital divides, infrastructure gaps, and worries about quality of learning. On today's program, we'll attempt to unpack in the next hour how distance learning is changing, and yes, sometimes frustrating access to tertiary education across Africa. We'll look at what works, where solutions lie, and how policy, technology, and perhaps creative innovation can unlock opportunities for many more young Africans. Joining me are Olugbemiro Jegede, Emeritus Professor and Foundation Vice Chancellor, National Open University of Nigeria. Joining him is Samuel Ngadi, SaaS Technology Adoption Expert. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. Olugbemiro, what is behind this? Why is Africa's tertiary enrollment so low compared to the global average?
Thank you for having me on your program.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Distance education or distance learning started around 1785 in the US when a lady called Anna Tickner and some other people decided that they were going to teach shorthand via the distance to as many people as may wish to do that. And since then, distance education has been growing. But of course, recently it has blown open to a system where everybody, anywhere, everywhere now wants to teach via the distance. And the reason is very simple. There is no way you can teach everybody, put everybody in a classroom situation, what we call brick and mortar. Because you cannot put anybody, take any particular room, there is a maximum number that the room can take. So if the room can take 50, you cannot put more than 50, except people stand on top themselves. But if you send a message, if you teach via the distance, then you can reach as many people as possible. So distance learning is about enhancing access to education. It's about allowing as many people as possible as who may not have had a chance to go to the formal face-to-face teaching to have access to education. And that is why distance learning has now come to the main stage of almost every country is doing it. And I'm glad that Nigeria has decided to go distance learning. You will recall that in 1983, Nigeria started what was called the National Open University. But 1 year after, because we didn't understand what it was all about, it was promptly closed. And I used to say that Nigeria is the only country in the world that opened an open university and promptly closed it after 1 year. But 20-something years after that, President Obasanjo's government decided, no, we must bring back distance learning because so many people are looking for it. And there's no way that you can be setting up universities, polytechnics, and whatever to accommodate everybody. So that is why distance learning has now taken the center stage. Second, you recall that during COVID, everything virtually stopped. School stopped, and they were wondering what will happen. So in other parts of the world, as well as in Nigeria, people now resorted to using distance learning mechanisms to teach. And people have found that very, very, wonderful, and has been very practical. And so this is now beginning to take the whole world, to the extent that Nigeria now has 6 open universities. The first one was the National Open University of Nigeria, where I had the humble opportunity of being the foundation Vice Chancellor, and we started it in 2003. And now, believe it or not, the university, the National Open University of Nigeria, now has close to 750,000 students. That is just
true.
one university.
Yeah, I've actually had the honor of seeing a couple of persons tell me they graduated from National Open University. And with the advent of social media, of course, we see online how they celebrate the opportunity and the privilege of graduating. You've been able to lay down for us, you know, the reasons why this has become so entrenched and celebrated. But I was looking more, I'll stay with you before I come to Samuel. I will stay with you because you are in the area, the field of education as well. Why do we have, or what do you think is responsible for the low enrollment in tertiary institutions in Africa compared to the global average? I mean, we're at 9, if I can get that figure correct, only about 9% of Africans in the 5 years after secondary school are enrolled in tertiary institutions, and that's according to the World Bank.
There are so many reasons, so many reasons. One is political. There's no political will. Many governments in Africa just pay lip service to education. We say we want education, but nobody really wants to do it. As they say, if you have to put your money where your mouth is, and many countries are not doing that. That's number one. Number two is economic. How many, in many, this country has got about 230, 250 million people. 75% of the people live in rural areas, and 75% of the people, from what we know, live within about between $1 and $2 a day. But so where will they get the money to send their children to school? The third is sociocultural. In many areas, many places, people don't want to send children to school. They want them, particularly the males or the females, they want them to go to farm, they want to go and do fishing, they want to go and do all that. The fourth is actually historical. Right from the word go, even during the colonial era, they only trained the few people they wanted who can help them to further whatever the colonialists wanted to do. So it has, and even fifth, we have, right from immemorial, Africans have relied on traditional education. Unfortunately, when colonialism came, it forced us to forget about traditional education, and so we now latched on to Western education, but we just couldn't afford it in many ways. So these are the reasons. But
all right, I know you have some more.
Nigeria is trying.
Okay, I know you have some more. I'm sorry to interject. I know you have some more, but I want to also get Samuel's opening comments, and then I will come back to you to perhaps finish your thoughts along with a fresh question. Samuel, I mean, we understand that long-distance learning has been used across Africa for a very long time, long before we had the Nigerian National Open University. And it's always been with us, like the prof was also trying to say, but now it is more online. Could you talk to us about some of the models that existed? Did we have models of distance learning before now, before it all became online?
Yeah, thank you for having me on the show as well. I think the short answer to that is yes. While I wasn't opportune or privileged to be actively learning at the time when these models existed, I do know that they existed. I remember seeing my parents kind of being involved in correspondence learning, so where they received documents from some schools like outside of Nigeria, and they would kind of respond and fill out in the form of tests or questions or coursework. They would respond to the questions and send these back via post to the respective institutions. And this was for them the opportunity to study skills that weren't actively, to put the professor's point early on, being taught in kind of the more local settings and the more local universities at the time. So I do know that this correspondence learning was a model that existed and was quite heavily used. There's also radio learning platforms. I know like the BBC at the time had a couple of programs. I'm not sure if they still do now. But yeah, I think these are the top two that come to mind right now. I think thankfully, thanks to technology and the new technologies that we have now, from the internet to cloud solutions, we're able to kind of democratize access and we're able, and I mean, education technology startups and companies exist now that are able to deliver platforms that give access to more people and pretty much provide education, distance education at scale.
It's been touted as flexible and accessible. You're a beneficiary, so you are in a good spot to answer this. But is it really reaching the young people who need tertiary education more?
I mean, I would say, again, looking at the Africa perspective, right? I would say there's a challenge of infrastructure, right, which obviously plays a major role in how these learning facilities get to the target audience, i.e. the young people. So there's internet challenges, there's challenges of, I mean, in Nigeria, we know too well about electricity and how that is a challenge as well. There's also challenges around the motivation, right? There's a decision to make around going on the traditional university route versus going on the kind of more education platform based learning. And so I think the big challenges that are impeding access to the young people would be more around the infrastructure, but also the will from their parts to participate on these platforms.
So let me come back to you and ask you to, if you have a concluding thought on my previous question, please go ahead with it. But add to that in your response, talk about the quality of the distance learning that we have. There's been some concern, and I as well have seen people who say they graduate from some of these open universities and in this distant learning process, and you kind of question the quality of education that they received. What are some of the concerns being shared in this regard? Prof, the question is for you, yeah.
Oh, okay. Let me write on with what our friend has just said. Distance learning started several years ago in this country with correspondence education. Correspondence education where people were being sent materials through Wolseley Hall and all that from England, and they will work on it, they will send it by post. So we had several levels of technology intervention in distance learning. The first technology that was used was print. So they will post it and post that, they will post and you do that. Now we have gone beyond that, where the online, the internet, the virtual system has taken over that. But let me come to the point of quality, what you're talking about. When we say distance learning is actually provided to take the distance out of people's reach of education. The distance can be geographical, it could be infrastructural, it could be historical, it could be economic and whatever. However, it is not quality. It is, as far as I know, and by my own practice of distance education for the past 30, 40 years, it is ignorance that says that the quality of open and distance learning is lower than the former face-to-face. In fact, it's the reverse. At the moment, all the universities in Nigeria, all the open universities that we have, all the distance learning centers we have, by the way, we have 31 distance learning centers that have been recognized by NUC. Other universities have been recognized to start distance learning centers. Then we now have the National Open University of Nigeria and 6 other new open universities that have started. All of them use the same curriculum that NUC has prescribed. So it is the same thing that University of Port Harcourt will use, the same curriculum they use in teaching physics, or the University of Ibadan will use in teaching physics, that any open university in this country or any distance learning center will be used. So there's not like quality. In fact, because people have a way, distance learning has a way of enriching the resources that people use, because distance learning has a way of interacting with learners, because it has a way of making sure that there is a lot of interactivity. Distance learning has been shown to have, in fact, research has shown, and they studied it within 25 years, that there is no significant difference between the quality that you get via distance learning and via face-to-face. In fact, they have said that a lot of things affect face-to-face quality, because when you have a professor, you have a teacher who goes to teach face-to-face, that person for 30 years has not updated his notes. That person for 30 years doesn't even know how teaching is being done. That person doesn't know, the psychology of the learner.
All right,
what is wrong.
Olugbemiro, I want to come in here. I would want you to actually expand a little more. So I'm keeping a special question on that subject. But I want to go to Samuel. To what extent can distance learning help countries scale participation without expanding physical infrastructure? Because one thing is to say we're providing distant learning, but there are some courses that require, hands-on training.
And I think that's a really good question, because to kind of bring it back to earth, I wouldn't want to, and maybe make this a bit personal, I wouldn't want to be on the theater bed treated by a surgeon who got his degree or whatever via distance learning. So to your point, there are courses or there are programs that are best taught digitally, and there's programs that are that benefit more from a face-to-face model. I think and again, if I go back to the online narrative, and we can again come back to the quality conversation which you have with Prof, I think it goes back to the motivation behind kind of these models. In my opinion, I think the distance learning should be reserved for skill-based programs, right? So programs where the outcome of the learning process is a skill, it's a hand-on skill that can be applied. I think those should be reserved for distance learning. So whereas kind of the more traditional systems would benefit more from those programs like medicine, like engineering, where you require precision, where you have a level of detail that goes into every single aspect of the job or every single aspect of the activities that the professionals would perform. So I think these should largely play a role in what programs are being taught digitally or via distance learning programs. And then again, it also kind of ties in quite nicely with the question around how is quality controlled and how is quality assured? How is the quality of the learning process assured? And I think this roles that technology have to play in this, and maybe we can get to talk about them in a second, but to wrap up my thought is to say is that there are programs that should be reserved for distance learning, and those I believe should be more skill-based versus more career-based programs which would benefit from having the face-to-face model.
Part of it, but I was looking more as can they scale it up? That's the question I was more focused on. Can they scale? How can countries scale participation? Because at the moment, in my introduction, I said we had a lower percentage from Africa going to tertiary institution. And then distance learning, online learning, however you want to look at it, provides an alternative that has been embraced. There is no question about that. We also know that there are limitations to the kind of courses that can be done via distance learning. But I'm asking, can it be scaled up by government or public-private partnerships in such a way that we'll have more people getting involved? I'm staying with you, Samuel.
Well, absolutely. I think there's a role of the government in institutions like the National Open University, which is established by the government to address, the problem, I believe, of demand for tertiary education. And going back to the motivation behind these institutions, I believe that they can be scaled by the government through with this distance learning kind of removes the need for the four wall of the classroom, like the professor shared at the beginning of this conversation. So this is now made digital, is now made virtual, and such that the scale, it's easier to scale with the right infrastructure, with the right technology. But then it raises, on the one hand, where you're scaling to meet the demand of maybe young secondary school leavers that are looking to gain some form of tertiary education. You need to also consider the quality of the education that they deliver. And so there is that balance to be had with scaling and reaching more students versus providing the right quality and the right institutional regulatory and institutional frameworks to make sure that the quality of the education is kept at an acceptable level.
Prof, back to you. You were talking about quality, the curriculum that is the same curriculum that goes across board. Can you hear me, sir? Can you hear me?
But I'm quite eager to go to make contribution to this question that you just asked, because it's more like I said, it is more because of people's ignorance and not getting the information. Just 2-3 things. Number one, it is not true, and I don't think that is what's being done, that distance learning should be reserved to some non-traditional or whatever traditional subjects. In the world now, go to China, go to Australia, go to India, and all other places, they are now using distance learning to teach everything. Anything can be simulated. I can quote universities. The University of Southern Queensland in Australia uses distance learning to produce engineers, and they produce the best engineers in Australia. And everybody goes there to hire engineers.
So let me get some clarity, Prof. Let me get some clarity. Are you saying that this is done distantly between the teacher and the student on all subjects, and they still come out the same quality? Or you have, hold on, sir, let me finish. Or you have study centers where perhaps this teaching can be done, and then that center will have maybe the physical machinery or the simulation can be done. I want us to understand if there is a distinction here, because if there is, then the argument will still be that there might be some courses that are not attainable or tenable using the distance learning approach.
Anything that can be imagined can be done. Anything cannot be thought of can be taught in any way. In fact, there are psychologists that say that anything can be taught in any intellectually honest form to any child, anywhere, anyhow. Distance learning has now moved from learning anywhere to everywhere. It is possible to teach it two ways, and I will get you almost all, in fact, not almost all distance learning centers in this country, all open universities in this country do what we call hybrid teaching. That is, they do the correspondence or online, whatever it is, or using virtual, and also have study centers. The National Open University of Nigeria has got 71 study centers in this country. It is by government wants it to have a study center in every local government. So it is possible to do that. It is also possible to do distance learning completely via virtual distance. And there's no problem. All you do in engineering, in medicine, in town planning, in all courses, all programs that will require practical distance, they do it by simulation. I mean, can you ask yourself, how are pilots trained? Do you just get a pilot and give him a plane and say, go fly? They do it by simulation. Many of them are trained by simulation. And it's only after that simulation that they have their first flight where a pilot will have to go with the student before they now go to their own solo flight. So people have been doing it. I mean, people like the late Chief Awolowo, people like, even there are people who are still living today who have done their learning all through distance learning. Afe Babalola studied all through distance learning, and he has one of the best universities in this country, and he's one of the best lawyers that you have. We have at the University of Ibadan a gentleman, and you can go and talk to him, a gentleman called Professor Obaya. Professor Obaya is an emeritus professor. He's about 80-something now. He studied all through via distance learning. So it is possible to do that. Now, let me also tell you this. In China, almost they started with what they used to call radio and television universities. They have now converted them to distance learning, to open universities, and China has more than close to at least 100 open universities.
Prof,
the idea is no child. Let me just finish. The idea is that no child should be left behind. Nobody in the world should be left behind. That means everybody must be trained. How can you do it? Will you be constructing classrooms and laboratories everywhere? No, you can't. But let me tell you. Let me tell you something that we need to follow up. 2007, Nigeria embarked on a very massive communication satellite. It got its satellites installed or built by China because Nigeria wanted to go completely online and virtual using satellite to teach everybody. We all now have mobile phones.
Okay, that's the next question. Prof, there's so many areas to touch on.
Let me finish this sentence. That satellite is supposed to reach every local government, every village. But as of now, we don't know what has happened. We tested it. The National Open University of Nigeria was used to test that satellite. The medical school was used to test that satellite so that they can teach people in the villages, so that they can teach doctors in the villages via distance learning. Unfortunately, that satellite has disappeared. So if we can get it back, everybody should have free access. To technology.
I think this is where Samuel will come in. So Samuel, we're thinking about the question about the digital divide that we currently have. And of course, I'm curious to know your response to the prof saying that all subjects, all education can be done via distance learning. Let's go on this short break and we'll hear your response when we return. Distance learning is the focus. I still have Emeritus Professor and Foundation Vice Chancellor, National Open University of Nigeria, Olugbemiro Jegede. Also here, Samuel Ngadi, SAS Technology Adoption Expert. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your patience. So Samuel, I will come to you. You've thought it through. The prof believes that distance education can happen on any course from anywhere. You seem to have a contrary view. And then also talk to us about the digital divide. He talked satellite since 2007. I don't know where I was then, but I don't think I even knew what was internet until almost after my university. So talk to us.
Again, really good question. And with all due respect to the prof, I gave an example where I mentioned that I would be quite reluctant to be a patient being operated on by a surgeon who had got his degree or whatever via an online platform. And the reason is simple. I mean, I believe that there's some courses, there's some subjects that are best adapted to be taught fully via online or digital or distance learning platforms. And while there are others that benefit more from in-person based learning. So basically, you earn your competence on the subject or on the knowledge by being taught in person. And Prof shared an example of a pilot. Yeah, I mean, you can have 30, 40, 50 hours of on flight simulation, but you don't get called a pilot until you've actually kind of flown an aircraft, had a series of in-person evaluations and trainings where you can of course correct. So to that, if I stayed on that point for a second, where you have skills that are digital in nature, skills where you are getting to learn theoretical concepts, where you're getting to understand ideas, doing analysis, those I believe thrive better in a distance learning model, where you're talking about skills or programs where it's more kind of hands-on intensive, where, for example, you're talking maybe a chemist or a medical doctor. You would, as a chemist, you need to kind of play with chemicals, for example, right? So you need to have hands-on experience with these things. You cannot learn these things in the lab in online. You need to have experiential knowledge of these, and that's where I think the hybrid model that you touched on could play a role. But by and large, I think where the skill lives on the screen, we're talking about like a software developer, like a data analyst, digital marketing, content creation. I mean, you can learn these things via distance learning. The prof also gave an example about the origins of distance learning when he was talking about teaching shorthand. Again, this is a concept or a subject that involves writing, right? And these are best adapted to distance learning. Now, technology is constantly evolving, and so I'm not putting a ceiling on what distance learning can achieve and what can be achieved via simulations. But
yeah, but for now, okay, yes, this is your position. Yes. Then talk to us about the accessibility. Currently, there are still people who don't have mobile phone. As scary as that is in today's world, there are people who still go to the roadsides to make a call, just to make a call. It could be as a result of it not being accessible. It could also be as a result of not having the finances to do that. So talk to us about the digital space in Nigeria. Let's start with us in Nigeria and how it impacts distance learning.
I think by nature, when you're talking about distance learning, especially via online channels, then you need to have digital devices. You talk the mobile phones, your laptops, and a lot has been done. The rate of technology adoption in Africa or in Nigeria is grown quite exponentially, but there is still scope for more. We have a really young population. There is still, I mean, there's a lot of appetite and growing appetite for technology tools, and what we need to provide is access to these devices, either via public-private partnerships or via, we have private sector institutions that have been playing roles. Like, I mean, you have companies like Microsoft that do provide grants and provide schemes that allow people to acquire these devices, all aimed towards getting access to the internet, getting access to digital platforms, and being able to participate in the global economy. And I think this is largely the problem: the infrastructure, the access to digital devices, the cost of data, electricity. These are all some of the challenges that we need to surmount, and they're not specific to Africa, but they're more prevalent in our part of the world. And once we kind of can get past these challenges, then we can start to reap the rewards of the tools that we have in digital space.
Okay, Prof. There's one thing that I know that there's something that happens when you go to a class. The fact that there are other people there sort of compels or motivates you to, focus and learn. But distance learning has something that requires self-motivation. What's your thinking on how students cope with isolation and engagement challenges when it comes to distant learning? Because this is one area that they talk about a lot.
Yeah. What I want you to just imagine is how people join WhatsApp platforms. WhatsApp platforms have emerged as a virtual discussion, virtual village, virtual classroom, virtual whatever, where people talk, discuss, and chat amongst themselves without feeling the absence of seeing somebody face to face or relating to that person. That is the way we should begin to look at education now. It's not impossible. I still insist, and we have the records, we have the data, that any course, any program can be taught via distance learning. You can still do it through hybrid.
I need to come in here because I'm sorry, I need to interject and say this. I need to say this, and I'm saying it because I have had that struggle. I know of people that have had that struggle. In a modern day where you have so much cacophony of information, social media is filled with all kinds of distraction. If it is not the celebrity today, somehow they make it your business. And it is, you need to use that. How do you?
That is why, don't compare the social media with what happens as a teaching institution. In distance learning, they have what they call facilitators. They have what they call e-tutors. These are the people that guide you. In social media, you don't have anybody guiding you. You don't have any regulation. Anybody can go and put whatever they want on it.
I'm talking about the intrusion of that.
What happens in that environment gives the impression that anything you can discuss it. If distance learning is not the best way to go now, if virtual learning is not the best way to go now, why do we have Oxford University doing distance learning? Why do you have Harvard doing distance learning? Why do we have all these the top universities now doing distance learning?
I think you misunderstand the questioning tone. The questioning is to get the best out of this conversation. There is no question about the viability of distance learning. We're talking about some of the challenges that seem to exist. My question basically is how do you think, or are there mechanisms that exist, or are there ways that these students can, because I'm not talking about, difference between social media.
Yes,
these things come in, this distraction.
I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
It is possible to make sure that we bridge all these issues that affect distance learning that people tend to question. We can begin to teach even parents to be facilitators. We can begin to organize people within an area, within the streets, within whatever, to come together at certain times. What distance education will be doing very soon is that when people learn on their own in their houses, they no more say, okay, the school is where I go to play football, I do whatever. No, they will send a message and say, all of you in equivalent of class 4 should please assemble in this stadium and let's just chat and play. And then they go back to everybody studying on their own. It is possible. We are also thinking about the 20th century way of relating, where if you don't see somebody, if you don't talk to the person, then you are not doing anything right. No, things are changing. We need to change our mindset. It is the mindset of people that we need to change. If we can change that, things will work. The second is to make sure that government make available all necessary infrastructure. Like I said, government spent a lot of billions to set up a satellite, ComSat-2. Where is that satellite today? If we can have it, then issue of data will not come in because it will be free to everybody. Everybody can use it. The second thing is for government to ensure that they have study centers, that they have viewing centers where everybody can go and learn for free. Don't forget that in Pakistan, it was the women that started using mobile phone to do the trading that forced UNESCO and World Bank to assist them. Africa has got, or in fact Nigeria to be specific, has got 98% penetration of mobile phone. And mobile phone is still the least used. Everybody, every child in the university, almost everybody in secondary school now has a mobile phone. Even our grandmothers have got mobile phone. We all need just to sit down and tweak it and see how can we use that as a basic. We used to think that not everybody can use WhatsApp. Do you know what now happens? People are reverted to normal online phone because the channel of using WhatsApp is being clogged. A lot of people, even villagers, are using it now. So it is possible for us to work around the problem, the issues. We all need to sit together and work. Government cannot do it all alone.
Yeah, you did say at the beginning of this conversation that anything is possible if we can, envision it. Samuel, I know this is your area. Expand that for us. What potential does artificial intelligence and adaptive technology hold for distance learning in Africa? I mean, you can bring it down to Nigeria, it's your choice. All right, I'll go for a quick break. We'll be right back. We'll sort the audio out. We apologize for the intrusion, but we continue the conversation now. Samuel, if you can just conclude your thoughts.
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. So you asked around the role of AI and some of the newer technologies we have and the role that they can play in a learning experience or learning journey via online or digital platforms or for distance learning. Yeah. And I think that AI, one thing AI can be a huge force multiplier. The prof was talking about the roles of kind of leveraging parents and kind of guardians and people around the students to help tutor and provide guidance to students in online or virtual learning experiences. And I think AI can do this even much better, because what AI can offer is personalization of the learning process, but it can do this at scale. So regardless of my demographics, regardless of the location, the AI tools can quickly adapt to the student's learning experience or learning their required learning outcomes, and tailor make the learning experience to suit their needs. Another thing is around the quality, which is something that we've touched on a bit in this conversation, and we can use AI tools to pretty much guarantee that the quality of the learning process is in line with the required expectations or required outcomes for that course. Also issues around governance, issues around, I touched on personalization, learning analytics. So if we could use AI to, for example, figure out where a student has not maybe just skimmed through like coursework, and maybe they're supposed to spend 20 minutes on a project and they spend 5 minutes just skip through, and you can pretty much use AI to identify these things and make sure that the students actually go through the process the way they've been designed to, right? You can use it for teacher augmentation, for basically to scale and provide more cost efficient service delivery to the students, right? And I think again, with technology, I'm very careful to not give an exhaustive list, because I do know that technology continues to evolve, and there's still a lot more that we can do in this space with AI and other technologies.
All right. As we wrap up, please, what does a successful, sustainable distance learning ecosystem look like for Africa in, say, 2035? And what would be some of your top 3 recommendations or steps needed now to get there?
I think the first thing would be the right infrastructure, either via the government providing these or via public-private partnerships, to make sure we have access to the right infrastructure to support the different models, whether we're looking at the hybrid model or we're looking at the fully digital distant model. We need to have access to the right infrastructure. The second thought I have is on this subject would be around clearly defining how we are managing the quality, how we are providing distance learning solutions or virtual learning solutions to satisfy the demand for these services. And what I mean by this is, it's not enough to have 50 million graduates or 50 million secondary school leavers needing access to university and just admitting all of them into some digital platform. These need to be carefully managed to ensure that we're keeping the quality of outputs from these programs. And then we also need to clearly define scale versus personalized outcomes. And what I mean by this is skills that should be taught via distance learning platforms at this point in time be limited to those platforms or those experiences and skills that would benefit more from an in-person tutoring. Again, for this point in time, we kind of focus them accordingly.
Samuel, thank you very much for sparing the time to talk to us. We appreciate the insights you have provided.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Okay. Unfortunately, we couldn't get that final thought from Prof, but we thank him very much for being here. I hope you can hear me. Thank you. Really appreciate your thoughts, and I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you. That's the program for today. I'll see you next time. I am Felicity Ezewike. It's bye-bye for now.